ridiculously massive stars that are out there that are really, really enormous. We're going to use a G-type main sequence star like the one that we can get roasted by if we walk outside. It's convenient. That's what most stars in the galaxy are. It's a very average star, and it's what most terrestrial planets in the galaxy are going to orbit around. So we'll use our sun as the analog, and when we think of a star, we usually think of the sun. We're also going to assume that the Death Star is firing at its maximum power because it really wants to blow up that star for some reason. And it gets one shot. Because obviously if it's just sort of sitting there shooting it once a day for however long, eventually, yeah. So we're going to see what happens with one shot. Important corollary. Cool guys don't look at explosions, or nuclear fusion, or Death Star superlasers that are alarmingly close to your desk. Those guys are. So, brief thing about what is the sun. It's primarily composed of hydrogen, and that hydrogen is being fused into helium. What's happening is that because the sun is so big, its mass is actually compressing all of that hydrogen down into a much more compact state. Fun fact about Jupiter: as you get further and further down in Jupiter, hydrogen starts behaving like a liquid metal, and in the sun it turns into plasma, like what you would get in, one of the I don't remember what they're called, the balls where they have the neat sort of color arcs that can follow your fingers around. You get that kind of thing, and that's constantly fusing hydrogen plasma into helium plasma. And eventually this will cook off until there's no more hydrogen, and then it's all helium, and then eventually that will fuse into neon and then into carbon. And when it's carbon, that's game over, because then the star is at the end of its life cycle. Right now, the sun is at about 74.9% and 23.8% respectively of hydrogen and helium. So the energy needed to convect that hydrogen into helium is fairly well known. Other than that, the sun is composed of about 1% oxygen, 0.3% neon, and 0.2% iron. So the way that the Death Star actually functions isn't that it's imparting some sort of concussive force. What's happening is that energy is channeled from several reactors through those massive Kuiper crystals you just saw. The Kuiper crystals do whatever it is the Kuiper crystals do and emit beams of energy which are then fired towards their target. The beam superheats the matter in its path, and then the target is destroyed because the superheated matter is expanding, and then expands fast enough to achieve escape velocity, and the planet destroys itself because so much energy has been imparted. So the thing about this is that the hydrogen molecules in the sun are already superheated because they're already plasma. They're already redonkulously hot and redonkulously energetic. The Death Star isn't imparting a kinetic force, but what's happening is that it's adding energy to that existing crucible. So the fusion process is producing 384.6 yodawatts per second. It's the same as the shield output on a Superstar Destroyer, which we talked about last time. I don't know what they're using to fuel the Superstar Destroyer, but I want some. The Death Star is producing about 24 million yodawatts in a single shot. So 24 million yodawatts divided by 384.6 yodawatts in the fusion reaction is about enough to cause the same amount of convection as 62,402 point something seconds, or 0.72 days, or 17.334 hours, or 5 less hours than the total runtime of all Star Wars movies, not including Rise of Skywalker's movie, how long that's going to be. So ultimately, not that much. You'd honestly not know the difference, because by the time the sun is old enough for us to experience that difference, we're all going to be long gone, and our descendants are going to be long gone, and hopefully we find someplace else to live.
Now, there is a slight edit that I thought of just last night as I was looking this over. When we see in episode 4 Alderaan get destroyed, everybody, anytime we talk about the output of the Death Star super laser, we talk about how much energy it would just barely take to put an Earth-sized mass into escape velocity. The thing is, the bits of Alderaan, if you do a frame-by-frame analysis, are exploding at about 6% of light speed. So it turns out that if you take that as the power of a super laser, the Death Star is actually like 2 million times as powerful as it was. At that point, it can probably put a hole in the star, but it's still not going to blow it to bits, by the way. Although, I might have to look into it. I don't think it's enough to blow it into bits. The math gets hairy. So, the power from this Death Star and all that is, we're talking about these reactors that are just dumping energy into these kyber crystals that somehow store it. They store huge amounts, sun-level outputs of power and of energy, and they're just absorbing it all. Stuff just doesn't absorb that way. I've been saying for a couple of years now, kyber crystals are magic. And then last month I had a thought. And of course, I shall now present my thought. First, let's go over just a quick summary of the laws of thermodynamics. This is going to be the math-free version. Anybody who's taken a 400-plus level thermo class may now tune out for a minute. The friendly version, law 1, you cannot win. There is no such thing as a free lunch. You cannot get free energy, only move it from place to place. Hot, close to cold. A charger has a higher voltage than the battery that you're charging. Rule 2, you cannot break even. When you're moving energy, it's not 100% efficient. Chargers and batteries heat up when you're charging, and so some of that energy is not going into the battery, it's going into the atmosphere around. Rule 3, you cannot get out of the game. This sounds a little silly, but it's actually a translation of the third law of thermodynamics. And it's kind of key here. As soon as you're looking at the entire picture, you can quite often create something that appears as if it's breaking the laws of thermodynamics by having something cheating from the outside. The primary case of that was back when these laws were being theorized, Maxwell. Maxwell had this thought experiment that he called Maxwell's demon. Let's take 2 volumes of medium temperature gas, they're equal temperature, and there's a tiny gate. And there's this demon who watches, and every time there's a fast molecule of this gas coming towards the gate, he lets it through towards one way, but not the other way. And you can also do the same, keeping the cold ones in the side he wants to become cold, and letting slow-moving ones through. So eventually, all the fast-moving molecules are on one side, and all the slow ones are on the other.
Sounds like a really addictive phone game.
For our next presentation. How to get rich. So if you look at that, you're like, if all you're looking at are those 2 volumes of gas and the door, you're saying, oh, well, this is violating the laws of thermodynamics. But what's powering the demon? The demon requires energy to analyze these molecules and open and close the door. And that's the whole rule number 3. Getting out of the game, you have to analyze the whole thing. So we see this issue with, we're dumping energy into these kyber crystals. They're somehow, they're not getting super hot as they're absorbing thermal energy or, shooting them with radio beams, anything like that. We don't have to put more in. Like when you're, imagine you're pumping up a bike tire. It starts getting harder and harder to pump because there's more pressure working back. It's the same thing with any energy storage device. You have to work harder to get the last bit in, and yet these kyber crystals just keep sucking in energy and sucking in energy until they blow up. So I've been saying, they're magic. They're some kind of Maxwell's demon, and that's when it hit me. What's powering Maxwell's demon? When I said I was going to force the laws of thermodynamics into kyber crystals, I was serious. When we see how kyber crystals are used in lightsabers, and the Jedi needs to be strong in the Force in order to at least craft one and get everything aligned and get everything working. It's just that. There's something that they're tapping into the Force in order to work, in order to absorb all this energy. This keeps, if they just absorbed energy, anyway, the lightsaber would continuously absorb things. You'd be walking around, or first of all, the room that's stored in would be cold. It would probably be covered in ice. If you let it sit for 100 years, it might suddenly explode because it finally exceeded whatever its storage is without controls of something like the Death Star.
Then again, maybe that's why lightsaber crystals are found on Ilum, which is an ice planet.
Yeah, there you go. There's not enough energy for them to build up enough to spontaneously boom. All right. That's our stuff for today. If people have questions.
In that essence, would that mean that the Jedi would be trained, or the Sith would be trained at the power? Just the fuel to train.
We're going to answer your question. I just wanted to say real quick, before we get too far into questions and before people start running away, I did want to mention that there is a rating system for panels. So if you have enjoyed our presentation today and would like to see us come back next year, if you go on the app and find our panel, The Scale of Star Wars, if you rate us highly, then they may ask us back and we'll get to do this again next year. That was it.
Right. I'm not. I wasn't saying that the Force is what's being absorbed, but rather the Force is allowing the crystal to absorb energy with perfect 100% efficiency, essentially breaking the second law by using a little bit of energy from the Force. So I don't think using that would actually drain them of as much energy as the lightsaber or Death Star is putting out, but rather just in the aligning and all of that is the Force. Either the kyber crystal is itself manipulating the Force in an ongoing state, or then the crafting of a lightsaber also requires some Force to keep it aligned, maybe keep the crystal healthy and cutting it.
Yes. It's not there yet.
He was asking, does the mass of the ship entering hyperspace exceed the speed of light?
So the answer to that question is not yet. So during pseudo-motion, what's happening is the ship is accelerating from whatever speed it had been going, whatever relativistic speed it had been going, and it is accelerating to the speed of light. So it's not there yet. And because it is in a path of acceleration, and we don't get a very clear shot of the distance that is traveled during that pseudo-motion, it gets a little bit hairy to try to calculate the exact speed that the Raddus was traveling when it struck the supremacy.
She was farther back and she had fully entered hyperspace. Does it exceed the speed of light?
So
Different dimension, is the mass of dimension the same?
the explanation we're given is that once a ship crosses the threshold of light speed, hyperdrive is shunting it into an extra-dimensional space where the laws of physics apply differently. So it is, as long as pseudo-motion is occurring, it's not yet at light speed. And once it is at or above light speed, then it is in hyperspace and is no longer interacting with real space, with the exception of gravity shadows, which is interdictors, which is a topic for another discussion.
Basically, if she was back far enough, she would never, she'd be in hyperspace before she got there, and so she wouldn't hit it. She'd be fine on whatever course she plotted.
Yes?
Given the use of multiple crystals and the nice little disc and all the rest on the Death Star, could we get any more out of this in terms of some sort of coalescent or self-organizing beam or something like that? Some of your emitting power requirements might be a little bit lower.
That's a.
We're trying to bootstrap ourselves a little too much now.
I don't know, the fact that the beams somehow, there's nothing in the middle there, I'm guessing that there's some kind of force field projector that's actually blending the beams together, and that's what the disc is. Because visually, we don't see anything, the beams just hit it and then turn, and they all go straight together. But whether that sort of thing could reinforce, I think we're already, it's described as a super laser. So we can assume that the beam is already fully coherent, which means that all the photons, the electromagnetic fields in every photon in that beam is wiggling at exactly, they're not just the same frequency, but they're all moving together. That's what makes a laser so bright, is that all that energy is exactly together. Yeah, I don't think there could really be any reinforcement there because it's described we're told it is a laser. So at that point, it's just a lot of photons. As to why they chose it to be visible rather than probably something more efficient up in the X-ray spectrum, well, because it's cinematically cool if you see the beam. And in fact, you could say that, so why would they choose that? The Empire wanted it to be visible because it's a weapon of terror. So you want to see it.
That, better not have an invisible weapon that you can't actually tell if it's firing or not if you want to
Right.
way too close.
Yeah, invisible weapons, that sounds like something a rebel would use.
Sun crusher.
Sun crusher. So the sun crusher works by a different principle. The sun crusher is, for those who don't know, this is legends and it's a little obscure. What the sun crusher is doing isn't imparting more energy into an existing biome. What the sun crusher is actually doing is it is altering the coefficient of hydrogen fusion in a way that is causing the fusion process to accelerate and the star explodes. So it is fundamentally altering the physical interactions with all of the existing molecules of the star.
If the physics explanation would be, it seems to be slightly adjusting the Planck constant in a localized space.
We can certainly do that as a future topic.
Yeah, if you adjusted the Planck constant by how much, you do that. Yeah, that's a good one.
Any other questions? Any suggestions for topics for next time? That maybe yes.
World builder, or world destroyer.
World Destroyer. I'm going to have to look up the Wikipedia article on it because I don't know enough about that series of books and comics.
No, because they listed some of the biggest sizes were bigger than a sun or bigger than a moon, and then they kept building and building and building and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So then it's just like, how big is too big?
Well, that gets us into conversations about Dyson spheres, and that's always fun, but I'm not prepared to present on it today.
Pod racing.
We can definitely do something about pod racing.
Yes, time.
Yeah, there's some things about pod racing. I mean, first of all, it's so visually cool, but it's also, I mean, aside from the obvious sanity issues of the drivers, there are some aerodynamic things that really. Yeah, the aerodynamics of it I find questionable.
On the subject of aerodynamics, in the panel description we did have a topic that got scrapped, and that was could porgs really fly? For anyone who doesn't know, in episode 8, when they went to film on Skelly Michael, it turned out it was infested with puffins, lots and lots of puffins. And so rather than try to move them, which would get them in trouble with a number of different agencies, and without trying to just digitally erase them, which would be a pain in the butt, every puffin got a porg costume. But porgs are kind of interesting shaped, and it's not immediately clear if they are aerodynamic enough to actually fly. I discovered after trying to research this that is incredibly boring. And we're just going to go with they have about the same shape as puffins or similar small birds. The real question is what do they eat? They don't have bills, so they can't eat fish. And they have sharp teeth, so they're carnivores. What are they eating?
We tend to focus on the physics and occasionally chemistry of things, but if there are any biologists out there who want to join us for next year, I have a list of things that I'm not qualified to speak.
Let's talk about rancors.
That's one of the, so let's talk about rancors. Yes, exactly. There's some things about the rancor. It's what are its bones made out of? It can move that fast and be that heavy, and that sort of thing. I could speculate, but I'd rather have someone who's actually studied more biology than I.
So yes, porgs can fly, and I am not qualified to say why they can't or couldn't.
Probably takes a lot of energy.
Which means they have to be able to get a lot of protein, which means calories, which means they are carnivores because they have sharp teeth. What are they eating? My theory is that porgs are food, even to porgs. Chewie had that one that was cooked, and the other porgs were looking at him like, oh, and we all sort of imprint on that. Oh, they're upset because he's going to eat their friend. No, they want some. They're mad because he's not sharing. I could go on for a while about carnivorous porgs because I think that's amazing.
He actually spent way too much time researching the porg, but he couldn't turn it into anything that was exciting other than, oh my God, they're all carnivores.
That is the most interesting thing about porgs. Yes.
Ewoks too.
Yes, Ewoks. We should have gotten Wookiees. But no, we got big Wookiees, and I'm okay with that.
The thing I mentioned near the beginning of we have to assume that people aren't idiots. I'm not going to ever present on it because the original essayist did a far better job than I ever could. He described just how Ewoks are positively the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Because look, you've got all these stormtroopers. Rebels are attacking, and then the Ewoks attack, and the stormtroopers ignore the rebels and go chasing after the Ewoks and lose. But why did they make that decision to go after the Ewoks in the first place? Well, they've been stationed on that move for a couple of years, and you got to think they're very familiar with these things, who also are currently set up to fight giant beings because they take out the ATSTs with no problem. So these guys are horrendously dangerous.
Plus you also have it from the Emperor's words that they are his most elite troops.
Yeah, right. These are his elite troops, and they live in fear of these fuzzy little things.
Yeah, that's a topic I want to get into, the Ewok movies, which I don't care. I love those movies.
We know that eat humans because there's.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Those Stormtrooper helmets aren't off of hostages. Those are off of dinner.
Right. So that's something that we always try to take into account. Is you can't say as we study this, oh well, that couldn't happen. But as I said at the beginning, why did it happen? These people aren't idiots. Well, occasionally a few, but
We must conclude that they have a reason for acting the way they do.
so with that, thank you all for coming.